Gorillaz is one of my favorite bands. But they're not really a band. It's actually just two British guys, with Damon Albarn of Blur fame doing all the music and Jamie Hewlett doing the art and stuff. Which is a very integral part of the Gorillaz experience. Hewlett brings this sort of fake band consisting of 4 cartoon members to life. Consisting of Murdoch on bass, 2D on vocals and keys, Noodle on guitar, and Russell on drums. They've got an entire story running throughout all these albums, told through the music videos, fake interviews, and much more. And people really care about this stuff. Like, these fake band members get a lot more attention than most real band members from, real bands. But I gotta be honest, I'm personally not super invested in that stuff. The music videos are very good, don't get me wrong. But they often don't even fit that well with the music, in my opinion. Like, I got into Gorillaz through listening to their entire albums, and these music videos just don't really fit with the sort of image I've created of the music in my head. So, anyway, all that to say that the music is what we'll primarily be talking about today, although Jamie Hewlett's work on the album covers will also get some love near the end of this video. So, what does their music sound like exactly? Well, I lied earlier when I said that Damon Albarn does all the music on his own. He works with a ton of collaborators for most of these albums, which gives Gorillaz more of a real band feel, and it also gives all of their songs a very unique flavor, which makes their sound very hard to define. It's a wide array of musical influences, mostly synth-pop, but there's also a lot of hip-hop, alt-rock, house, and so much more. They've basically touched every genre under the sun, and my favorite Gorillaz songs are the ones that you can just not label. They're every genre at the same time, but it still sounds like natural and it's not messy in any way. It's pure magic. I love their music so much that I decided to do a marathon of listening to all their albums in a day with 2 of my friends. And then afterwards I listened to all of them at least 2 more times, but most of them more than that, to really solidify my opinion. And today I'm gonna share that opinion by ranking all of their albums from worst to best. Let's go.
On Cracker Island we will go. Join the collective in the sky.
Cracker Island is their most recent album, and the only one that I got to experience in real time. It started with a rollout of 6 singles, the biggest ones being the title track, Silent Running, New Gold, and Tormenta. And aside from Tormenta, with its very lackluster Bad Bunny feature, I really enjoyed these songs, and still do. They went with a lot more of a simple synth-pop sound for these ones, but it works very well. They're super catchy tracks, although they do lack some of that Gorillaz uniqueness. Which is the ultimate problem with this project as a whole, because all the other songs sound the same. They all just feel like weaker versions of those 3 bangers, and it gets very stale and boring very quickly. I honestly could not tell you what most of these tracks sound like, because they're all nowhere near as catchy as the singles. It just gives me zero reason to return to this album instead of just listening to these 5 singles. The aforementioned 3 bangers, Baby Queen, which is pretty fun, and Skinny Ape for those EDM breaks that admittedly go pretty hard. So overall, I'm gonna give Cracker Island a 5.5 out of 10. Very disappointing. The Fall is honestly a very apt name for this album, as it functioned as the sort of temporary downfall of Gorillaz, with it being much weaker than their first 3 offerings, and it also preceding a 6-year hiatus for the band, which kind of splits up their discography into what I would consider the classic era and the new age era. You'll see throughout this video that I'm definitely a classic Gorillaz kind of guy, with The Fall being the only stain on the perfect track record of that era. However, we have to consider that this isn't really a mainline Gorillaz album. It supports some of the least collaborations, as it was made by Damon Albarn during the Plastic Beach tour, almost entirely on an iPad. Which, don't get me wrong, is really fucking cool. Making an entire project on such cheap gear that doesn't sound like complete shit serves as a great example to anyone who wants to start making music. However, of course, when compared to the rich sounds of what came before, it is quite the downgrade. The production is obviously nowhere near as good, but because this album was made in such short notice, the songwriting took a significant dip here as well, and it makes, just like Cracker Island, for a pretty boring listen overall. Now there are some interesting songs here, like the Joplin Spider, which almost goes into Death Grips territory with its harsh synths blasting in your ears. Or Little Pink Plastic Bags and Amarillo, which sound very clean and are just great songs that would honestly fit quite well with the rest of the band's discography. But those are the exception. Most of the other tracks do sound pretty iPad-y and leave me with a feeling of, okay, that was fun. That about sums up the album for me. I don't hate it, it's a decent time, and it would work perfectly fine as background noise, but that's about it. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. A decent experiment. The first half of Humanz is a fucking party, with only bangers, ending with that killer Danny Brown verse. But this album has a pretty bad case of what I called the second half curse in my King Gizzard video, cause the rest of this album is, guess what, just like the other bottom tier Gorillaz projects, boring. Again, it's not bad by any means, and overall I do like this album, it just once again gets a little stale. Especially with the last couple songs, which is a general trend for Gorillaz albums. I'm a dub the phenomena where a Gorillaz project kinda tapers off near the end, the last couple songs curse. Great name, I know. We'll get a bit more familiar with that later on. Now, if you're insane and you'd like these cursed last songs to extend a little longer, you could also listen to the deluxe version of Humanz, which is the only version on Spotify. And there's no like little bonus track in brackets in the titles to know where the regular album ends. No, you have to go out of your way to look up the normal track listing. And you should, because there is absolutely nothing of value to be gained from these bonus tracks. I don't get why the regular version isn't on Spotify. Please fix that shit. Anyway, the normal version of Humanz gets a 6.5 out of 10. A fun party.
Let's go. It feels so good to have a perfect song. It feels so good to be in total control. It feels so good to have a perfect song.
Alright, now we've reached the bangers. There's a pretty significant gap in quality between the haves and the have-nots for Gorillaz albums, so all of the upcoming records are great and I often return to them, starting with Song Machine. The concept for this one was to make an album of only singles, all of which came out over the course of 2020 as episodes, with an accompanying video and supporting at least one collaborator. So afterwards we got an 11-song project with the most features we've seen on a Gorillaz project yet, ranging from Schoolboy Q to fucking Elton John. This makes for a diverse listen that finally never gets boring, but there is still an overarching synthpop sound that holds it all together. It's a very cohesive listen. And although I don't love every song, there's a couple misses around the middle, this tracklist is mainly filled with bangers. There's the ominous opener Strange Times, which is a great encapsulation of the 2020 vibe. There's The Lost Chord with its transcendental vocals from, in classic Gorillaz fashion, an artist I'm not familiar with, Lee John. There's Pac-Man with its incredible Schoolboy Q verse over a beautifully funky beat. The legitimately emotional Friday 13th, the off-the-wall Momentary Bliss, and so much more. This album rocks, and unlike Humanz, the bonus tracks are great as well. Especially the absolute banger that is Opium with Earth Gang. That's probably my favorite track of this album cycle as a whole, and it's kind of a shame that it doesn't have a video and isn't on the main album. Although, once again, as a Spotify user, you wouldn't know that, because you can only find the deluxe versions. Why is this a thing? Anyway, I'm gonna give Song Machine Season 1 Strange Times an 8 out of 10. I can't wait for Season 2, if that's even ever happening.
I don't want this isolation. See the state of me now.
I was really debating whether I like Song Machine or the Now Now more, because they're great for totally different reasons. The Now Now is almost like the anti-Song Machine, as a lot of fans were complaining that 2D or Damon Albarn's vocals weren't that prominent on Humanz, even though they're a big reason people fell in love with Gorillaz in the first place. So, similar to The Fall, this record was made quite quickly and didn't feature a lot of guests. However, unlike The Fall, this album wasn't made on an iPad, and also, it fucking slaps. This is probably Gorillaz' most consistent album, as every song, except Idaho, is great, and there's a consistent psychedelic pop sound running through the whole album. The fact that every song mainly features Damon Albarn's vocals also helped to make this a more cohesive experience. I'm not saying I'd want every Gorillaz album to be like this. Of course, I love the all-over-the-place nature of their regular work, but I think it works very well for this album, and it gives a bit of variety to their discography. I'ma give the Now Now an 8 out of 10, a very cohesive listen. Man, Song Machine, the Now Now, and their self-titled are all so close in quality to me. It was very hard to rank, but I decided that this is the strongest. Even though, unlike the Now Now, it is probably their least cohesive listen. It's very clear that Damon was still experimenting with what he wanted Gorillaz to be exactly, and the result is an album where every song sounds completely different. There's a punk song, a Latin song, a horn-filled party banger, a groovy instrumental track with a dark underbelly, whatever the fuck New Genius and 5/4 could be classified as, and of course a dark hip-hop song that became one of their biggest hits and served as the blueprint for their next album, Demon Days. Essentially, what Gorillaz did for every song here is they took a genre and they made it funky. That's what keeps this record somewhat connected. It's all groovy as hell. But there's also a sort of melancholic edge to it all. It kind of feels like a band dealing with some shit, drowning out their problems with music. I don't know, it's very hard to explain. This is one of those albums that only really makes sense when you actually listen to it. It's unexplainable. There's so many weird ass sounds throughout this thing that they were somehow able to make work, like that loud ass whooshing sound throughout Slow Country, or those pew 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 keys on 19-2000, or that out of tune sounding flute on Rock the House. Basically every song has a collection of instruments that should never work together, but it just does, and I love this album for it. I'ma give it another 8 out of 10. An amazing debut. Demon Days is the album that's really solidified Gorillaz as a household name. It is one of those quintessential 2000s releases, and I love it. I've talked a lot about their reputation to blend different musical styles together, and I think that this is probably the best example of that. Mainly because when you listen to this for the first time, it all makes sense. This fusion of genres feels completely natural, even though there's basically nothing else like it. With this mix of alternative rock, hip-hop, and so much more, Damon Albarn, together with producer Danger Mouse, essentially invented a new genre for this project, what he himself described as dark hip-hop. And this is definitely their most hip-hoppy album, with features such as Booty Brown, De La Soul, and even the GOAT MF Doom in his prime, who delivers a killer verse on November Has Come. Absolutely love that track. However, there's also some songs here that couldn't be farther from hip-hop, like the beautiful El Mañana, the dance track There, and the alternative rock song, and my absolute favorite Gorillaz song of all time, Every Planet We Reach Is Dead. It has this driving, funky guitar/keys line that keeps getting built upon throughout the track, interspliced with Damon's heavenly vocals, until the instruments completely take over and explode in your ears at the end. It is pure euphoria. There is no other song like it, and Gorillaz has never attempted anything like this ever again, which is a shame, but they'd probably never be able to nail it like on this masterpiece. Now I get that that's not necessarily the most popular pick for the best song on this album, as obviously Demon Days also spawned some of Gorillaz' biggest hits, like the aforementioned banger Dare and the alt-rock classic Kids with Guns, which has a similar explosion at the end to Every Planet We Reach Is Dead, and it's also supported by one of my favorite bass lines ever. Dun dun, dun dun, dun dun. And oh yeah, there's also this other bass line on this album, not sure you ever noticed it, dun 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 dun. Yeah, obviously this album also includes the inescapable Feel Good Inc., which, despite its popularity as it is by far Gorillaz' biggest hits, can never be overplayed in my opinion. It is a perfect song. The juxtaposition between those serene and calm Albarn vocals and acoustic guitar on the first verse and chorus, with the grimy bassline and super energetic rapping on the other verses, makes for such a dynamic song that is quintessentially Gorillaz. So yeah, I love this album. I adore every song from Lost Living Souls all the way up to Dare. However, Demon Days has the worst case of the last couple songs curse, as Fire Coming Out of the Monkey's Head is alright, it's a cute little story, but it doesn't really stack up to the rest of the project. But then I just straight up do not care for Don't Get Lost in Heaven and the title track. I think they're very weak closers, and they always just kinda leave me with a bad taste in my mouth. It's kinda unfortunate. If this album ended with Monkey's Head, which I do think works pretty well as a closer, I'd be able to put this in the GOAT conversation and give it a 9 out of 10. But with the way it actually is, I'll have to give Demon Days an 8.5 out of 10. Absolute classic. Alright, as I alluded to in the intro, before I get to the number 1 spot, which I'm sure it's a great mystery what that's gonna be, I wanna do something new. I'm gonna rank all of Gorillaz' album covers, because I think they tend to be really great and iconic, and I wanna give some love to Jamie Hewlett. However, I'm gonna start pretty negative, because my least favorite thing he's ever made is the Cracker Island cover. Goddamn, this shit is kinda ugly, I'm sorry. The blurriness on 2D's hands and hat is fucking weird. The mix of cartoony drawings and realistic environments doesn't work very well in my opinion. The characters don't really stand out enough, especially when you look at it from afar, because of the colors and because they're really small in the frame for some reason. Just what is going on here? I don't get it. It's a 2.5 out of 10. I don't like it at all. Next up is gonna be the Humanz cover. I get what he was going for here, but I just do not like how the CGI characters look. It's very unappealing. Also, why is it missing the text above and below like in the Demon Days cover, which is clearly what is being replicated here? I think that would have fit just fine. It just kinda shits all over that iconic cover. I'ma give it a 3.5 out of 10. No thank you. Getting to the covers that I don't hate, we're starting with The Fall. This is just boring. It fits well with the album, it gives the sort of on-the-road, makeshift studio and 2D solo album vibe that the record has, but it doesn't make it any more uninteresting to look at. 4.5 out of 10, meh. Okay, now we're getting to the good ones. Big jump here. The cover for their debut fits perfectly with the vibe of the album. Those kinda low-key, underground, hip-hop vibes. It looks like a little gem you'd find digging through some old records. The only thing I don't love about it is the Gorillaz text. I get it's like meant to be graffiti or whatever, but the way the last 2 letters are way bigger and have a darker color, it just kind of annoys me. I think if they went a little harder on the gradient idea they're trying to get across here, it would have worked a little better, but still, I'ma give this a 7.5 out of 10. Iconic. Next up is the Now Now cover, which just has such a unique style. I've never really seen something like this before, with the pink sort of shadow and the amazing use of just 2 colors. The little wavy thing going on here also fits quite well with the more psychedelic sound of this album. I also love how it puts all of its focus on 2D, just like the album. It's great. I'll give this an 8 out of 10. Very interesting. Just above that is the Song Machine cover, which is fucking crazy. Just like the music, there's so much going on here, but it works very well. The crazy 3D objects scattered around this piano look so alive, and together with those drawings of the members in the background and the clean typeface, it just makes for an awesome cover. I could hang this up on my wall. Also, I want to give a shout out to the individual episode covers. Some of those are absolutely bonkers. I think Hewlett was definitely on something when he made those. Anyway, the Song Machine Season 1 cover gets a 9 out of 10. Crazy. It's kinda nuts that the Demon Days cover isn't my number one, because it's one of the absolute best and most iconic covers of the 2000s. When you think of Gorillaz, you think of this cover. This is still what these characters look like in my head. These mean side profile drawings are so fucking sick. It fits really well with the darker side of this album and of the Gorillaz backstory. Also, Tootie as a hickey, and that's awesome. 9.5 out of 10, iconic. Wow, it's kinda crazy how well the quality of the cover art matches with the quality of the music. These two rankings are very similar. But that probably also has something to do with the fact that a good cover can make an album sound better and vice versa. Anyway, my favorite Gorillaz cover and my favorite album cover of all time is Plastic Beach. Bro, that is an entire 3D model that was made in real life to make this vision of the Plastic Beach come to life. That is some commitment. And when you mix that fucking beautiful model with the orangey sunset color scheme and the amazing typeface matching the wavy ocean, you get the best album cover of all time. It's perfect. I also want to give a shout out to the deluxe version nighttime cover. That one looks sick as hell too, especially with the light of the lighthouse reflecting off the water. But the original is still the best one. It's a 10 out of 10. Perfection. Oh, I should probably talk about the album, shouldn't I?
Welcome to the world of the Plastic Beach. Yeah. Welcome to the world of the Plastic Beach. Welcome to the world of the Plastic Beach.
Here we are, my favorite Gorillaz album. This is by far their most conceptual project, dealing with stuff like climate change and the fakeness of many aspects of Western society through the lens of this fantastical location, Plastic Beach. This is another example of why I'm a little critical of the cartoony side of the band, because I think this album actually works best outside of the context of these characters and the whole virtual band concept in general. And I don't really like the idea of Plastic Beach being this real location that Murdoch lures the whole gang to and whatever else happens in the story. I think it works best as a representation of the themes tackled on here, and I think this album as a whole is at its strongest when approached in a bubble. It does a great job of setting up and exploring these ideas on its own, and I think the album is spaced perfectly, with nearly no misses, to the point where I'm gonna review Plastic Beach by just going through all the songs individually. That's gonna make this part of the video way longer than the rest, but whatever, it's Plastic Beach, seems only fair. The album opens with orchestral intro, which neatly showcases how rich the soundscapes of this album can truly get, and it sets a perfect tone for the rest of the project. Also, the way it smoothly transitions into Welcome to the World of the Plastic Beach, with those rising horns blasting you into the synths, and then Snoop Dogg going,
Gorillaz and the Boss Dog, Planet of the Apes.
goddamn, that's one of my favorite introductions to an album ever. When I heard this for the first time, knowing nothing about Gorillaz, aside from Feel Good Inc., this shit got me so hooked. It also works on a more conceptual level. The inclusion of California rapper Snoop Dogg immediately gets you into that beachy vibe. And the way the instrumentation goes from a live orchestra to a synth-heavy sound perfectly encapsulates this sort of plastification of the world, but also showcases the beauty in it that this album is trying to find. While Orchestral Intro did a great job setting up the rich orchestral instrumentation we'll get sprinkled throughout the project, this song perfectly showcases the main sound of Plastic Beach, which is synthpop. And this is basically the first time Gorillaz tackled this, with synthpop only later becoming their sorta main style. Although it'll never reach these heights again, and they never went as hard on the synths as they did here. Okay, wow, I got a lot to say there. I absolutely love the opener. But next up is White Flag, which brings us back to the live instrumentation sound with the Syrian National Orchestra for Arabic Music, which gives us another beautiful orchestral intro that then again transitions into a synth beat with rapping over it. This time from Bashi and Kano, two London rappers I'm not familiar with, who kill it over this very unorthodox production. Also really love this track, although it took a little longer for me to really get it. Then, on Rhinestone Eyes, we finally get our first Damon Albarn vocals, which shows how he really prioritized the art for this album, only utilizing his voice when it works best for the song, which also makes it more impactful when he does appear. And even on this song he shows great restraint, as it doesn't really have a traditional chorus. The hook is just that super catchy synth line. The way the soundscape then builds up throughout makes for another amazing track. Afterwards we get what I like to see as the sort of Rhinestone Eyes sequel, Stylo, which also features Albarn vocals and a killer synth line, but the real stars of the show here are Mos Def's abstract verses and Bobby Womack's incredible vocals. Right now, what a banger. Moving on, we get to Super Fast Jellyfish, which has never been one of my favorites here, but I do love the back and forward between the many collaborators, describing some like shitty fast foods, with crunchy carrots, oh that's chicken. But then we get the big boy, Empire Ants with Little Dragon, one of the finest songs ever made. I won't spoil it, just go listen to this if you haven't before. The switch up in the middle is one of my favorite moments in music, and gives me goosebumps every single time. After that masterpiece, we get to sit back and relax a little bit with the instrumental Glitter Freeze, which brings us to Some Kind of Nature, which has an amazing Lou Reed feature, going back and forward with Albarn. Great stuff. Speaking of great stuff, On Melancholy Hill is one of Gorillaz' biggest songs, and for good reason. It's able to use these very upbeat synths in such a way to express this melancholic feeling. It's beautiful. Another song that really benefits from only having Albarn's vocals. Same goes for the next track, one of my favorites off the album, Broken. Sort of a sequel to On Melancholy Hill, exploring similar emotions, but this one's even more powerful in my opinion. Then we get another Mos Def feature on Sweepstakes, kind of a sequel to Superfast Jellyfish. This one instead touching on gambling. The build-up here is off the fucking wall, and works well as a representation of a growing addiction, getting more and more manic as it goes on. Nearing the end of the album, we get what kind of feels like a closer with the title track, starting with that amazing guitar intro that hits even harder due to the complete lack of guitars before this point. And then, when it goes back to the synths, oh my god, that is music right there. Nothing more needs to be said, it's one of my absolute favorite Gorillaz tracks. But next, something tragic happens. The last couple songs curse strikes again. To Binge does not nearly live up to the other Little Dragon feature, and Cloud of Unknowing is a snooze fest. Every time I get here, I wonder if maybe the title track should have just been the closer, but Pirate Jet does actually slap and ends the album very neatly. Shout out to those springy noises on here that took me an embarrassingly long time to realize are just a heavily edited voice saying Pirate Jet. This album is full of these little textures that you'll keep discovering the more you listen. And I've listened to this album a lot, because I fucking love it. Plastic Beach gets a 9 out of 10. One of the best albums of the 2010s. So that's it. That's my Gorillaz ranking. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I mean, if you got to this part, I assume you did to some extent. So I would appreciate it if you drop a like and maybe subscribe to my channel. I'll be making more rankings like this in the future. The next one will probably be on Kanye West. And I also have one up already on my favorite band, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Maybe you'll enjoy that. Also, I want to start ranking the covers on all my album rankings from now on. So I didn't do that for King Gizzard, but I want to give some love to Jason Gallia, who did all of their covers as far as I'm aware. So here's my very quick King Gizzard cover art ranking, including their newest two that weren't out when I made my video. Here we go. Made in Timeland, Laminated Denim, Float Along, Fill Your Lungs, KG, Changes, The Silver Chord, I'm in Your Mind Fuzz, Flying Microtonal Banana, Quarters, Ice Death, Planets, Lungs, Mushrooms, and Lava, Gumboot Soup, Sketches of Brunswick East, Butterfly 3000, LW, Nonagon Infinity, 12 Bar Bruce, Oddments, Eyes Like the Sky, Fishing for Fishies, Omnium Gatherum, Paper Mache Dreamaloon, Murder of the Universe, Petrodragonic Apocalypse or Dawn of Eternal Night and Annihilation of Planet Earth and the Beginning of Merciless Damnation, Flight B741, Infestor Rat's Nest, and my absolute favorite, Polygon Wonderland. Okay, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Now I got some very important stuff to get to, so see you around.